I still remember that knock, sharp, frantic, almost desperate, the kind of knock that doesn't just ask for your attention, it demands it. I was in the middle of a quiet Saturday afternoon. No work calls, no errands, no drama, just me, my cat curled up on the couch, and the rare kind of silence that settles over your home when life finally feels stable. For once, I wasn't bracing for chaos. Until that knock. I got up, still holding a cup of coffee in one hand, wondering if it was a neighbor or maybe a package delivery. What I wasn't expecting, what no part of me could have expected, was to open the door and come face to face with her. Marlena. My mother. If you can even call her that anymore. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years. Not after what she did. Not after she remarried practically overnight and cut me off like I was a loose thread in the hem of her new life. She didn't visit. Didn't call. Didn't even send a card for my birthday. And now here she was, dressed like she was headed to a 5-star gala, red lipstick flawless, hair in perfect waves. She didn't even look nervous. Just calculated. And beside her was Lacey, my little half-sister. She was clutching a worn-out plush bunny, her tiny fingers wrapped tightly around one of its ears like it was her lifeline. Her backpack looked overstuffed, like it had been packed hastily, maybe even with things that didn't belong to her. Her eyes scanned my apartment nervously, then darted back to our mother as if waiting for direction. Marlena smiled like this was some spontaneous playdate. Hey, sweetheart. Can you watch Lacey just for the weekend? Just a quick little getaway with my husband. We'll be back by Sunday night, no later. Promise. No apology. No explanation. Not even a proper hello. Before I could open my mouth, she bent down, gave Lacey a kiss on the cheek, handed me a manila folder, something that looked like it belonged in a lawyer's briefcase, and turned to leave. That was it. Wait, what is this? I asked, thumbing through the papers, catching a glimpse of legal wording and what looked like consent forms. She was already halfway down the hallway, waving back at me like this was no big deal. You'll be fine. You two can bond, like old times. Bond? As I stood in the doorway, watching her disappear with the click of her heels, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Deeply off. Lacey just stood there, looking small. Lost. She said you'd be happy to see me, she whispered. And just like that, my heart cracked. I brought her inside. Set her up in the guest bedroom, made her a grilled cheese, found her a cartoon to watch. She didn't speak much. But she smiled politely, said thank you, even offered to help clean up. Too grown up for 9. Too careful, like she was walking on emotional eggshells. That night, I waited. I kept checking my phone. Refreshing. Looking for a text. A call. Anything. But nothing came. Not that night. Not the next day. And that folder? I finally sat down and read it. And what I found inside changed everything I thought I knew about this visit. It wasn't a visit. It wasn't a favor. It was a trap. And it was only the beginning. By Monday morning, my gut wasn't just uneasy, it was screaming. Marlena still hadn't called. Not a single message. No updates. And when I tried to call her, straight to voicemail. Every single time. I checked my phone's call log, as if somehow I'd missed a notification. I hadn't. I checked my email, my texts, even my spam folder. Nothing. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. Lacey, on the other hand, was still trying to act like this was a sleepover. She'd borrowed my oversized hoodie to wear around the apartment and was quietly coloring on the living room rug while the morning cartoons played in the background. But every so often, she'd glance toward the door, toward the window, waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. I sat across from her at the dining table, that manila folder spread wide before me. Pages and pages of legal jargon, and buried in the fine print, a temporary transfer of guardianship. Signed. Dated. Notarized. My hands trembled. She had this planned. I muttered under my breath. This wasn't some impulsive drop-off for a weekend getaway. This was calculated. She'd planned to disappear, to offload her daughter onto me without even the decency of a conversation. And somehow, she had filed official paperwork to give me legal custody, even if temporarily. I called her new husband's number. Disconnected. I checked her social media. Deleted. Marlena had effectively erased herself from every corner of her digital life. And suddenly it hit me like a freight train. She didn't plan to come back. Lacey walked over while I was mid-panic, clutching her bunny. She said you'd take care of me. Like a real mom. Those words hollowed out my chest. I couldn't respond. I couldn't lie to her. Not when she was looking at me like that. Like I was her last safe place. And maybe I was. Later that day, I drove to her school to speak with the counselor. I needed to know what Marlena had told them, what paperwork was on file. Maybe someone knew something, anything. But when we got there, the school secretary looked confused. We weren't told she'd be staying with anyone. Her mom just called last week to say they were going on a family trip. We assumed she'd be back by now. I was stunned. She didn't tell you she left her child with someone else? She didn't submit any emergency contacts. The woman shook her head. We don't even have a record of your name in the system. It took everything in me not to scream. This wasn't just reckless. It was dangerous. If anything happened to Lacey, the school wouldn't even know to call me. In the eyes of the system, I didn't exist. I sat in the car afterward, trying to collect myself while Lacey sipped apple juice from the cup I got her at the gas station. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I picked it up in a flash. Hello, Marlena, but it wasn't her. It was a lawyer, and what he said next made my blood run cold. Miss Weller? This is Attorney Grayson Lee. I represent Child Protective Services. We've been made aware that a minor child is currently in your care under unofficial circumstances. We need to discuss the nature of this arrangement. Unofficial? Even with the folder of papers? Even after all Marlena's careful deception? Suddenly, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a runaway mother. I was now being pulled into a legal storm I didn't sign up for. And Marlena? She wasn't just off the grid. She was hiding. That call marked the beginning of a spiral I wasn't prepared for. The lawyer's voice, clinical and unbothered, was a sharp contrast to the emotional chaos erupting inside me. We need to verify your authority to care for the minor, he said. There's no formal record in our database, and the mother is currently unreachable. I explained the documents I had, notarized papers Marlena had left behind, giving me temporary custody. But his next words cut through that reassurance like a blade. Miss Weller, a notarized statement isn't the same as court-approved guardianship. At best, it shows intent. At worst, it's paper without power. I was stunned. So what does this mean? That I can't legally care for her? There was a pause, the kind that makes your throat tighten. It means we'll need to assess the situation formally. Expect a home visit within 24 hours. And just like that, I was under investigation. I hung up the phone and just sat there, frozen, while Lacey hummed quietly to herself on the couch, unaware her entire future was hanging by a thread. I wasn't just her temporary guardian anymore. I was now the only adult standing between her and a state-run shelter. And I didn't even know if I had the legal ground to stop it. By evening, a social worker named Dana arrived. She was polite but probing, her eyes scanning every corner of my apartment like she was calculating danger in the shadows. She asked about my employment, my living situation, my relationship to Marlena. She asked if I had ever filed for custody before, if I had a criminal record, if I knew where the girl's father was. I answered everything, honestly, carefully, but I could feel the doubt simmering beneath her surface. You say the child's mother left her here, alone, for how long now? 3 days, I said quietly. No contact since. She disappeared on her honeymoon with a man I've never met. Dana scribbled notes. And you're her half-sister? Technically. We share a mother. Another scribble. Another glance around the apartment. Then she looked at Lacey, who was now curled up on my bed, clutching her bunny like a life raft. She seems attached to you, Dana observed. That's good. Stability matters. But her tone wasn't reassuring. It was procedural. The next morning, I was called into court. Not for a trial. Not yet. But for an emergency hearing to determine if I was fit to retain temporary custody. I stood before a judge in borrowed heels and a blouse I hadn't worn since college interviews, trying to look like someone who had her life together. The CPS attorney presented the situation: an abandoned child, left without formal transfer of guardianship. The mother uncontactable. The sister, me, not legally vetted. Then I spoke, and I didn't read from notes. I spoke from the rawest place inside me. Your Honor, I said, I didn't ask for this. I didn't plan for this. But this little girl has been dropped into chaos, and I refuse to let her become a case file. I know her. I know what she eats, what stories help her fall asleep, what her favorite color is. I may not have her blood, but I have her trust, and I will not abandon her like our mother did. For a moment, the courtroom was silent. Then the judge leaned forward. Miss Weller, you will be granted emergency temporary custody, effective immediately. But CPS will continue their investigation, and this court expects full cooperation. Relief swept through me, not joy. not victory. Just the fragile, flickering sense that I had bought Lacey and me a little more time. A thread to hold on to. As I left the courthouse, Lacey ran to me from the waiting room and threw her arms around my waist. "Can we go home now?" she asked. I knelt to her level. "Yes, baby. We're going home." But deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. After the court ruling, you'd think things would calm down. But instead, it felt like someone had lifted the lid on a boiling pot, and everything underneath was about to spill out. I had legal custody, yes, but not answers. And I knew deep down, Marlena hadn't just disappeared. She was hiding something. The next week was a blur of trying to give Lacey a sense of routine while dealing with a mountain of legal, emotional, and financial pressure. I was barely sleeping. Every knock on the door, every unknown phone number made my stomach twist. I kept asking myself, who was this man Marlena ran off with? Why leave no emergency contact? Why leave her child behind with no way to reach her? Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my grandmother. She hadn't spoken to me in almost 5 years, ever since I'd confronted her about how she enabled my mother's destructive behavior during my childhood. "I heard about the mess Marlena made," she said coldly, like it was some sort of gossip she was tired of already. "She got married at some courthouse in Nevada. The man's name is Brian Orton. He's older, wealthy, doesn't know about Lacey." I was stunned. "What do you mean he doesn't know about Lacey?" "She left her daughter with me. Because she told him Lacey was her niece," Grandma said, like it was just another Tuesday. "She thought if he knew she had a kid, he wouldn't go through with the wedding. And she wasn't about to lose her last chance at a cushy life." I felt something inside me snap. My mother had lied. Lied to the man she married. Lied to Lacey. Lied to the courts. And worst of all, used me, again, to clean up her mess. I hung up on my grandmother without another word. That night, after I got Lacey to bed, I sat in the living room, trying to decide what to do. I stared at the court documents on my coffee table, reread every line, every clause. I thought of that judge, the one who gave me custody because I spoke from the heart, and I realized something chilling. Marlena could come back any day and take Lacey away. Despite the abandonment. Despite the lies. Despite everything. Unless I acted. So I started digging. I gathered every piece of communication I had with Marlena, the text messages where she begged me to watch her baby girl for just one weekend. The screenshots of her Instagram story where she bragged about starting her dream life with a new man. I found the notarized letter again, and then I reached out to a friend who is now a family lawyer. When I told her everything, she went silent. "You have a solid case for abandonment," she said. "Especially with her lying to her husband and giving you de facto custody. But you need to act fast before she resurfaces." So we filed. Emergency petition for full legal guardianship. And in tandem, a restraining order, not out of fear, but as a legal maneuver to prevent Marlena from removing Lacey from my care until the case was resolved. Within 48 hours, Marlena's perfect fantasy came crashing down. Marlena showed up 3 days later. Not with remorse. Not with a worried expression. Not with an apology. She waltzed up to my door with an overpriced suitcase, sunglasses perched on her head like she was stepping out of a magazine spread instead of returning from abandoning her daughter. Her nails were freshly done, and her smile looked polished fake. Calculated. "Sweetheart," she said, arms outstretched, like nothing had happened. "I'm back. How's my baby girl?" I didn't even open the screen door. Instead, I held up the manila envelope I had prepped for this exact moment. Inside, a court notice, the restraining order, and a printed copy of the petition for full custody. Her smile faltered. "What's this? You don't get to stroll back in here and pretend like you didn't vanish without a word for over a week, Marlena," I said, voice steady but burning. "Lacey cried for you every night. She thought she did something wrong. I had to tell a 5-year-old child that her mother wasn't coming back, and I had no idea when or if you would." She tried to push past the door. "She's my daughter." I stepped in front. "Not legally anymore. Not without a court battle. And believe me, I'll be there with everything you've done. The lies to your husband. The abandonment. The forged stories. The notarized letter that says you left her in my care indefinitely. All of it." Marlena's voice dropped low, venom seeping in. "You think you can take her from me? After everything I've done for you?" That was the moment I snapped. "Everything you've done for me? You left me with my abusive stepfather so you could chase men. You called me selfish for asking for food when you'd spent your money on a new purse. And now, you abandon your second daughter for a fake marriage built on lies and think you're the victim." Her cheeks flushed with rage. "You always were a cold little brat." I smiled, not kindly. Maybe. But this brat has a lawyer, and a judge who actually cares about children, and a whole file with your name written all over it. She left screaming that she'd see me in court. But this time, I wasn't the scared little girl she could manipulate with guilt. I was a grown woman, protecting a child, her child, from a life filled with broken promises and instability. Lacey watched quietly from the window. When Marlena was gone, she asked, "Is Mommy mad at me?" I crouched beside her and held her hand. "No, sweetheart. She's mad at me because I told her she doesn't get to hurt you anymore." And for the first time, Lacey nodded like she understood something bigger than she could say. If you've never stepped into a courtroom to fight for a child you didn't give birth to but love with your entire soul, I hope you never have to. The hearing took place a month later. Marlena tried to delay it twice, claiming she was unwell and traveling out of state with her husband, the one she hadn't told about Lacey's disappearance. But my attorney was sharp. We pushed it through. The courtroom was quiet, almost too sterile for the gravity of what was unfolding. Marlena arrived in designer heels, her lawyer in tow, one of those slick, image-over-evidence types who kept smirking like this was just another Tuesday. She took the stand and sobbed. Sobbed. About how I had stolen her child. About how she had trusted me to babysit, and I had twisted the situation to suit my personal grudge. She painted me as bitter, jealous, and unfit to care for anyone, let alone her beloved Lacey. The judge listened. Didn't blink. Then it was my turn. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I handed over a binder of evidence. A notarized letter she had signed with the dates of Lacey's stay. Text from her after the weekend, saying she was finding herself. Screenshots of her social media showing she'd flown to the Bahamas for a honeymoon, days before she returned to pick Lacey up. A recording of her, outside my door, yelling, "You always were a cold little brat." A psychological assessment from Lacey's school counselor, detailing signs of emotional neglect. Marlena's face cracked. I wish I could say I felt satisfaction, but honestly, it just felt heavy. Sad. Because what she was losing wasn't about me. It was about the girl who waited by the door for her mom to come back. The judge read every line of my petition, every page of the evidence. Then he looked over his glasses and said the words that made everything real. This court grants the petitioner temporary full custody, with supervised visitation rights awarded to the biological mother pending evaluation. Marlena gasped like the air had been punched out of her. Her lawyer whispered something, and she exploded, slamming her purse down and shouting, "She's manipulating everyone. This isn't fair." The judge remained calm. "Ms. Marlena, another outburst like that, and I'll revoke visitation completely." And just like that, she was silenced. Lacey wasn't in the room. But when I picked her up from school later that day, she looked up and asked, "Am I going home?" I crouched down, held her little backpack strap, and said, "You already are home." They say motherhood is something you're born into, that it requires biology, blood, or at least a signed certificate. But when I looked into Lacey's eyes, into the soft hurt and guarded hope behind them, I realized something different. Motherhood is a promise. Not one made in a hospital room after birth, but one made daily, in the early mornings, the late nights, the whispered stories before bed, the hugs that last a few seconds longer than necessary just to remind them they're safe. And I was ready to make that promise to her. Every day. The first few weeks were quiet. Cautious. Lacey tiptoed around the apartment, always watching, always bracing for the moment I'd send her away. She never said it outright, but you could see it in how she packed her backpack neatly every night, just in case. One night, she asked, "Am I staying here for Christmas?" I was stunned. That simple question, so casually asked, carried a lifetime of heartbreak. I sat beside her on the couch, took her tiny hand in mine, and said, "You're not just staying for Christmas. You're staying for everything." Her lip quivered. She didn't cry. She just nodded and leaned her head into my side. We started new traditions. Saturday pancakes with whipped cream smiles. Sunday walks to the park, where she picked one flower and gave it to me without fail. A tiny calendar she used to track happy days, and every square had a sticker. I enrolled her in dance class. She'd always wanted to learn ballet, but Marlena thought it was a waste of time. Her joy when she got her first pink tutu was unmatched. She twirled until she was dizzy, fell over, and laughed so hard I had tears in my eyes. She started calling me Mama by accident at first, then on purpose. I never corrected her. Meanwhile, Marlena was spiraling. The court had ordered a psychological evaluation after her outburst in court, and the results weren't promising. Her visits remained supervised, but she missed most of them. When she did show, she'd sit stiffly, barely speak, and always left early. Eventually, the visits stopped altogether, and Lacey stopped asking about her. It was gradual, like a wound closing. One day, she didn't mention her mother at all. Another day, she drew a family picture, just me and her, holding hands under a sun with a giant smile. I had it framed. It hangs in our hallway now. And every morning, when I walk past it, I remember, I didn't choose this dot, but I chose her. And I would do it again, 1,000 times over. Time passed, but I no longer feared its movement. Every sunrise no longer marked another day of holding my breath. It marked another chance to build something real with the little girl who had changed everything. Lacey blossomed like spring after a long, bitter winter. She started laughing louder, sleeping through the night, making friends at school. Her teachers said she was creative, empathetic, a natural leader. She painted stories with glitter and chaos and called them masterpieces. And to me, they were. We took our first trip together, just the two of us. A quiet cabin in the mountains. Snowflakes on her mittens, hot cocoa by the fire, her head resting on my lap as I read the same bedtime story she loved 3 nights in a row. That trip was everything childhood should be. Safe, joyful, filled with tiny moments that made time stand still. By spring, the court had finalized everything. I was no longer just her guardian. I was her legal mother. I cried when the judge stamped the papers. So did Lacey Dot. She looked up at me with trembling eyes and asked, "Does this mean I really have a forever home?" I knelt beside her and whispered, "You've had it since the day you knocked on my door." We celebrated with cupcakes and her favorite movie, and she fell asleep with icing on her cheek and the adoption decree tucked beneath her pillow like a treasure. Marlena, for what it's worth, faded into the distance. I received a letter from her lawyer months later. She had moved out of state with her husband, relinquished all parental rights, and hadn't even left a note for Lacey. But by then, we didn't need closure. We had peace. One evening, we sat watching the sunset from our tiny balcony. Lacey, with her legs swinging from the patio chair, said, "I used to think no one wanted me, that I was just someone people dropped off when they got tired." I squeezed her hand. "But now," she continued, "I know I was just waiting for the right person to find me." My heart broke and healed all at once. "I'm so glad it was you," she added, before crawling into my lap and resting her head against my chest. We didn't say anything for a long time after that. We didn't need to. Because love doesn't always come the way you expect it. Sometimes it arrives in a backpack at your front door. Sometimes it calls you mama before you even know you're ready. And sometimes, if you're lucky, love gives you the family you never dared to dream of. We built that family together, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever known.